All right, thanks again for joining us once again on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. I am so happy that our guest kept his word. We talked to Kebba Tolbert back in January 30th of 2020. That seems forever ago, but also seems like yesterday. I remember it like yesterday.
Right.
So help me welcome back Kebba Tolbert from Harvard University. Kebba, how are you?
Yeah. I'm doing good. I'm happy to be on this and enjoyed some of the other conversations I've heard you have. And obviously, like you said, January seems like years ago, given what's changed. If someone had said, if you and I had that conversation, said, "Hey, guess what? In July, this is going to be the state of affairs." I'm like, "You're crazy," but you wouldn't have been in. So this is where we're at, and I'm happy to be here and have this dialogue.
Yeah, I think I was I didn't stay for the meet, but I think it was the weekend you and Boston University had a meet on Friday and Saturday or something. I think it was that
Yeah, we
weekend.
were hosting Crimson Elite, and they were doing Scarlet and White, and we were in the middle of the indoor season.
Yeah, I had a
Those that was
blast.
gonna be the high times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, right. Had a blast. Actually, sat down with two of your teammates as well, Mark Mangiacotti, good friend of mine for a long time, and Brenner Abbott. So, if you haven't listened to part one with Keba, and actually the whole Harvard crew, it was really interesting to interview all three in a row there. Pause right now. Go back. It's episode 5 for Keba. You will. We're going to pick up right where we left off, so you'll enjoy that. So let's pick up where we left off. When we last spoke, we got to right around you were leaving McKendree to go to Syracuse. I believe maybe Carol Smith Gilbert had put in a good word. Pick us up from
yeah.
there and how that happened.
So Carol called me. I was at nationals. Just had finished nationals with McKendree. We were in Canada at Simon Fraser University, and I'd had a bunch of athletes staying over afterward to compete in the Harry Jerome Classic meet. So we were going to be there maybe a week longer, 10 days longer. I can't remember the exact time frame, but I probably had 6 athletes staying, something like that. So Carol calls me, says, "Hey, I'm at national." She says she's at NCAA's, and that she had talked to Andy Roberts, who was the head coach of Syracuse. She said she had talked to Gary Winkler, and that Gary had talked to Andy on my behalf, and that she had talked to Dan Paff, and that Dan had talked to Andy on my behalf, and that Andy was very interested and wanted me to get a hold of him and send him my materials. And so I did right away. I reached out to Andy. He and I spoke. That was, late May, early June. I got back to Lebanon, Illinois, and I talked to him a little more. I got a call from the associate athletic director, Janet Kittle, and she calls me and she says, "Hey, before we bring you out, I want to let you know that it pays this much, $37,000. Want to make sure that would be okay with you, And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that'll be okay." And I was making like 36,000 at the time, so 37 seemed like, oh my goodness. And so we get the phone, and I'm like, I've run around my apartment like, I might make 37,000. What? I hit the jackpot. So it was funny because she was like, "I want to make sure that's okay." I was like, okay.
You're like, I'll make it work.
Yeah, So they ended up flying me out a couple of days later, offered me the job that day, and I flew back that afternoon, that evening. And the next day I left for a meet in Hawaii with a couple of kids that I was coaching. I had a meet called the Maui Invitational. And the old track and field list that used to be run through the University of Oregon that everybody was on, the meet director had put something out saying they were looking for emerging elite type athletes. I'd had some good people, and so I said, "Hey, I've got these people. Would you be interested?" They flew us out. They put us up. I reached out to Carol, and I reached out to Curtis about athletes they were coaching. They flew their people out. So it was a great 4 or 5 days out there.
Now, you
And
just
I've been
mentioned
to 46 states because of track and field in my life, and that's how I got to Hawaii.
you said 46.
Yeah, I'm missing 4 states that I haven't been to.
Yeah, what are the 4?
Alaska,
All right.
Wyoming, West Virginia, and South Dakota.
Huh. You got to change that, man. We got to, I'm a collector at heart. You got to collect all 50.
Yeah.
You mentioned a real interesting part of track and field that I know no one younger than us knows about this. You mentioned the Oregon, what was it called? The duck board?
It's TNF listserv, yeah.
TNF listserver. I remember when I was an undergrad coach at Troy, going to figure out where the computers are because they weren't like they are today where they're everywhere, logging on, getting the green on black text, getting it was all the emails basically just paste and copy together. So you'd get
Yeah.
an email from Kebba saying da 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 da, and then an email from someone else. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
That was like, people have no idea what we had to go through back then.
Right. So there's two things I tell people. Like, one is, so that listserv was how you stayed informed,
Yes.
because there were people who was all over the world. It was, just you send an email to the list, it goes through, and if there was a meet going on in Zurich, or a meet going on in Lausanne, or a meet going on in Texas, and that's how you got results, within 24 to 40 hours. Back then, mid 90s, late 90s to 2000s, until meet started really putting out results on websites, that's how you got results.
Mm-hmm.
Meetings, sometimes USA Today, if it was a really big meet, like then it was the Golden Four, and then the Diamond League, all that. But if it wasn't the top three, you might not know who got fourth or fifth. So that was how you find out what happened. And back then, for a number of years, you had 1-800-94-TRACK, and you'd call in, and Vic Holt.
Oh, I didn't know this.
This is like about 94, 95-ish, for about 4 or 5 years. You'd call up, and Vic would he'd call a race. Like, it might be Niangabu, it might be the Danish / Kenyan 800-meter guy, Wilson Kipketer.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, so and so they're off, and they went through in 50.1, and coming down the home stretch, and he might narrate another race like 100, and he would on a big meet day, he might have 2 or 3 call-ins, and so you'd call him maybe at 4. And he'd say, "I have another update in an hour and a half," and that's how you found out what happened, because
And this is a 1-800 number.
Yeah, 1-800-94-TRACK.
So it was free to do this.
It was free.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had to get blown up, man. Of course,
Yeah.
you couldn't even tell a lot of people about it. That's the problem. We couldn't have gone
But
online.
they would advertise in track and field news and stuff like that. I mean, that's how you found out immediate results. And then that in the listserv, you get full results later. But it was like, man, like that was it. Because for me, it came on TV, it might come on the weekend. If it happened on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then you might get you might see the results. You would wait for track and field news to come out to find out what happened. Like, not last week, like last month. And you're like, oh, that's what happened. And so that's, those were the ways we did it. Yeah.
No Facebook, no.
Right.
I remember it caught on to me pretty early in that serve that content was really important. So even when I was at Troy, we weren't hosting big meets by any means, but we'd have every once in a while a pretty good kid competed on our team or something else. So even little old Troy, I would, after every one of our meets, I would go on the, send it to the listserv, who got first, second, third in their times,
Right.
things like that. Because I just knew it was like, oh, people, content.
Right.
Content. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That just really brings me back when you said the duck listserv, man. That's
yeah, there's that. And then TrackWire, people, the TrackWire thing was a big deal. Like, we wouldn't find out what happened in Division One. Every week you would get a fax.
Right.
You could get it in the mail, you could get a fax, and they'd put they have their rankings, and they'd have the big news that happened. Like, it was very old school, and that was new school for them, but it was very old school compared to what we if a meet happens and we don't know within a minute what happened, we're in arms.
Oh yeah, right.
Dude, me included.
Well, so we learned back in January, you're from, I'm going to get it messed up because I'm not from New York, the Bronx or?
The Bronx, Co-op City in the Bronx.
Okay.
It's a subsection of the Bronx.
Got it. So you get the job at Syracuse. Did you grow up, I don't know how college athletics necessarily works in New York. Did you grow up a Syracuse fan? Was this a big deal in that sense?
No, I wasn't a huge Syracuse fan. I didn't really have a college team when I was growing up. But, you know about them because, the big time basketball and
Right.
New York State and things like that. So it was cool. It was my first Division I job, and amongst Division I jobs, it's probably the most high profile school in terms of like Power 5-ish. That wasn't a thing back then, but they were the Big East, and the Big East was a big deal in football and in basketball, especially. And in cross country and distance, the Big East was a big deal too. So it was like it was like a big time job to me. I had never gone to a football game with 50,000 people before. Never been to a basketball game with 30,000 people. It was, and it was cool.
Wait, you didn't have that at McKendree?
No.
Did you ever have 50,000 people? Yeah, Iowa West.
Right.
So what was it like going, I'm going to say back home, but Syracuse is still far from where you grew
New York,
up.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, it was much easier to get home for vacation.
Sure.
But it was really cool. A big learning curve. Recruiting was very different. In some ways it was the same. You get on the call and you're emailing, but the people who are answering your calls and calling you back all of a sudden, is tremendously different. Syracuse is a very good academic institution, so the types of kids I had to recruit were different. But we know Syracuse had an international reach, it had a nationwide reach, and so I was able to get several really good recruits in my first year, and we had very good facilities. We had an indoor track, an outdoor track. We actually had a second indoor track, the Carrier Dome, that we never used except for Big East championships. But we had Big East indoor every year that I was there, and so we'd practice at Manley Fieldhouse, and we'd host regular season meets at Manley Fieldhouse, but we do the Big East at the Carrier Dome. And I competed in both in high school because Syracuse used to host the high school national meet, and the prelims for the 200 and the 400 were always at the Manley Fieldhouse on the Saturday, and then the final day of everything was at the Carrier Dome.
That's kind of cool. That is kind of coming back home.
In 89, 90.
Wow.
So it was great. I mean, we had a budget. We travel. We go to Miami for spring break every year. And with the team, we travel to California. We go to Houston. There was one series of weeks where we went like Miami for a week, came back, went to Houston for a meet, came back, went to Houston again, came back, went to North Carolina. So there was times where I was like, shoot, I'm spending 4 days on the road. I was by myself and everything. And I felt like, why am I paying rent? But it was great. Learned a lot and was able to coach some good athletes, have impact on people and just, I'd never coached Division I, so it was my first experience. And that was really cool.
Was it always a goal to get Division I, or did that not matter? You were just wanting to get to wherever the place you would be best at?
No, it was a goal, but part of it is because, when you're young and when you go to certain meetings, Division I. And I've been in Division I since then, so I haven't left. But I think everyone, myself included, thinks, Division I is it. And that's where you get paid the big bucks, and that's where you have this. And Division I is this. It's small schools and big schools, and schools and big conferences that are supported, and big schools and big conferences that aren't supported, and everything in between. So now I've coached Syracuse. I've coached Portland State University. As head coach, I was at UTEP and Harvard. So, mid-majors, 3 mid-majors and 1 major, and they're all extremely different. Friends that coach, at various Division I schools as assistants and head coaches and associates and GAs and everything. And it's not a monolith, and you can see that even through this pandemic, with schools, the decisions that schools are having to make because of their climate, their resources, their everything. And so Division I is extremely diverse.
Yeah, I think
when you're young, you think, Division I, I'm going to hit the jackpot. It's like, it's not bad. And I've stayed in it, but also it's, the other thing about Division I is that it's a different lifestyle. So I had gone to D3, did grad school D3 and NAIA, and I'll back up a little bit. So, and I'm not saying this to diminish at all D3, but it's a different lifestyle. Your summers are more your own in D3. I haven't had a summer off since I've been in D1, whereas I had basically had summers off when I was in D3 and NAI. Not that I didn't do any work, but the amount of work that needed to be done at that time and the amount of work that was expected at that time is 85% less, and I think that that's the culture of those types of institutions too. So again, I'm not saying that we didn't do work in that D3 and NAI people don't work hard, because that would be a complete lie. But the summers have a different rhythm to them in those divisions to me.
Yeah, and by rhythm, you almost mean not at all. And what I mean by that is, once you do NCAAs, and if you have anybody go into USAs, you turn around, it's July 1, there starts recruiting in a normal year, by the way, not fortunately, but if you do any kind of camp, man, there goes, a week of the actual camp, but months of planning. And then again, you blink and the kids are back on campus, and it's season, fall training. It really does amaze me.
And the recruiting is different, international travel for recruiting. You have to make international teams. So, I've had I was fortunate, and I say that for real, having your season extended and going to July, August is fortunate as a coach. It creates challenges and difficulties, but that means you were fortunate enough to have an athlete that can make a team or make it to that point, and you get to either travel with them or see them compete or coach them. Are there some headaches involved? Sure, but they're unique opportunities for you and the athlete. But I had one season where Pan Am Juniors were in Medellin, Colombia. They were at the end of August. I had two kids on the team. I had a young woman who was a freshman, and a young woman that was coming in. I had Autumn Franklin and Jade Miller. Autumn was going to be a sophomore. Jade was going to be a freshman. So move-in day for the freshman was the day after the meet. So Jade flew from Medellin to Harvard to move in. Autumn went back home, but like I flew back. It was at Harvard on move-in day. And then like one year with Gabby in 2018, she was going to the Diamond League final in Brussels, and we left on whatever the Harvard moving day for the freshmen was. They moved in, and I got to meet people, family, say hello, help that, and we flew out that afternoon. And her season ended like August 31st, September 1st, September 2nd, something like that. And so like, those are fortunate things. I got to travel and see the world again because of track and field, because of what the athletes were able to accomplish and do. But I mean, yeah, it's different.
Every once in a while at NCAA outdoors, I'll be talking to a coach. I will not drop any names on this one. And they'll say something like, how's it going? Like, oh, it's middle of June or whatever. I'm ready for some time off. And I remind them, I was like, well, it's your fault you're here. Like, you coach the kids here.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's stay at Syracuse. You were the head coach of Andy Roberts. I unfortunately never got to meet Andy. However, his stature, like he was around forever and did a lot of good things. How was it working for a guy like that?
It was mostly good. There were some challenges, and I would say that one, he gave me my shot in Division I, and let me coach and recruit, and I was a recruiting coordinator, and I was a jumps and the multis coach. But we spent a lot of time together, and we talk. His office was right across the hall from mine, and lots of mentorship. And we didn't see eye to eye on everything, and that's okay. But like, despite some of the difficulties, it's a very valuable and worthwhile experience, and I wouldn't trade it, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it weren't for that experience and those times and the opportunities and things I learned. But we had a lot of fun times. There was a lot of cool times that were really frustrating and annoying. And I've talked to Andy Roberts several times in the last decade. And what I would say is that everyone's on a journey. And I think that even some of the difficulties he and I had were because of the journey he was on. And I don't say any level of disrespect at all. Just like, I think he's at a place in his life now where, he has some more inner peace, that maybe he might approach some things differently. And even now, 20 years later, 17 years later, having left Syracuse, I have a different perspective. I remember when I left there to go to Portland State and was the head coach at Portland State, I remember sitting in my office being like, oh, that's why he wanted me to do this. And it wasn't even that I thought that he was right. What he asked me to do is like, I understand why he was saying, go check with compliance on this, or go check with on this, because, when you're in charge, you don't want your assistant to do something that's going to get you on the hot seat. So there were things that I understood later, that, why things were a certain way with him, that I didn't understand at the time. So, I look back and feel very fortunate and feel, maybe blessed that I had the opportunity, and it paved the way for a lot of things. And he was supportive in a lot of things, in a lot of ways of me and of my desires. And he was respectful. And like I said, we had our things we disagreed about and couldn't see eye to eye, but all in all, I think it was a very positive experience.
You had mentioned, going from D3 NAIA, and then you get to D1, and before you get to D1, there's these, you think it's going to be one way, and then you get there and maybe it's a different way. Talk to us about, you go from Syracuse to Portland State, and a lot of us think about coaches, we think about, oh man, if I was the head coach, I would do X and Y and Z, and this would be wrong. I can't believe we don't do it this way.
Yeah.
What was it like? You're the big cheese, you're in the big seat. You
learn pretty fast that the person you thought was very flawed, that was your boss maybe, that you're like, oh, they make sense on certain issues, or that you understand, like, you have to interface and interact with administrators and alumni and student athletes and parents and high school coaches and club coaches, like in a different way as an assistant than a head coach. And you're like, oh, I get it. And you might still feel like, okay, I want to do it this way, but maybe the way you're thinking that you want to do it is not quite as easy as it looked from the other side and from the assistant coach's chair. And so, I'm reasonably opinionated, as people that know me. I have strong views on things. But I also I learned very quickly, because my first year as head coach I was a failure. I had 1,000 missteps.
Well, okay, now hold on. So, because now you can look back, you have the wisdom of experience.
Right.
What makes you say that you were a failure? Those are strong words, Kebba.
Administratively, I was poor. I wasn't good administratively because of paperwork and getting it. And for the whole program, I wasn't very good at communicating with the whole team, various things that needed to be communicated regularly, or I wasn't clear in all my communication with my team in a way that was helpful. Those are probably the two biggest things. And then the other thing is that sometimes you want to get things right. Meaning like, you might talk to your sports supervisor or administrators about various things. And oh yeah, they say that's okay. But, we had some stuff hit the fan my first year at Portland State, and things that I had agreed with my sports supervisors on. I won't say they were forgetful, but there was no paper trail to say there were certain things that were alleged that I was like, I talked to you about this, you said this, and they agreed that we had talked about it, but they weren't quite sure that what we did was what we concluded. And I'm not throwing them under the bus. There was some, I had a coach that I had to let go. And because of that coach alleged some things, and it created havoc. And the other thing you learn as being a head coach is that, yeah, you're in charge of your program, but the whole, because that coach alleged some things, got to like the presidential level, and the president was telling the AD, like, look, so there were certain things I couldn't even say to people that were asking questions, but hey, what happened? Or can you tell, like things that would have, I won't say cleared me, but things that would have painted things in a different light, because we weren't trying to avoid litigation. So they're like, don't comment, don't say anything, refer comments to this person. And so certain things looked a certain way in the press that were not at all true. And my AD and them knew it wasn't true. So, I mean, they had my back in that regard, like they were going to ride with me, but we couldn't defend ourselves and put the truth out there because we're trying to avoid litigation. And so you realize that you're really an unimportant person in the grand scheme of a university. And so, we weathered that, survived it, and the program got better and things like that. So it was a very big teaching moment. But, I didn't know what I didn't know when I took the position, and I learned a lot. And so I was just talking with someone earlier today about head coaching. I'm an associate head coach at Harvard. I'm not the head coach, but like whenever I have friends, and especially minority friends, but any friends that get a head coaching job, Bill Walsh wrote a book called Finding the Winning Edge. Do I have it? Hold on a second.
If you're listening to us, you can't see this, but so Kebba's at home, obviously, all in the background here. There must be 200 books. If you know anything about Kebba, if you go follow him on Twitter and whatnot, the guy, I thought I was a book reader. Kebba puts me to shame on book reading. Did you actually find it?
It's at the office.
Okay, I was going to be so impressed that you got so many books.
But the first 5 chapters of that book are all about organization, and by Bill Walsh, who was a mastermind of the 49ers dynasty when they were really—
the West Coast offense, yeah.
And so I got that book and I read it after that first year. Jim Van Oudegen is a good friend of mine. I think he might have even suggested it to me. And it has so much detail about how to organize your team, how to organize your communication, things that you're in charge of that nobody tells you, and Bill Walsh would have meetings with the secretaries about, hey, we're going to make sure we do things this way. And not that, you do everything in there, but it gives you a framework of you've got to have this level of organizational thought program to be successful. And that, so many times you get promoted to head coach because you're a good assistant, and they're really different jobs in a lot of ways. And if you don't know that, you can fail. And, in sport, sometimes if you fail at a job, you might not get another opportunity. And so, you try to help people say, look, no disrespect, no shade. I'm not trying to say you don't know what you're doing, but this really helped me understand, helped me see some things. I wish I had read it the year before I got the head coaching job, but it was really helpful afterward. Maybe it might help you before you get started, type of thing. So it's Finding the Winning Edge. It's out of print. It's like $200 on Amazon, but it's a great, it's like a $60 book that's out of print that every once in a while you can find it, but if your library has it, or you can interlibrary loan or copy chapters, those first 5 chapters are gold.
Yeah, don't get me on my library soapbox. Everybody, you pay taxes for your local library. I love the library. That's one of my favorite things in the whole world, man. We always have 10 books for the kids and everybody. If you ain't using the library, you're just throwing away money. A common theme is something that you mentioned there. A common theme we have with assistant coaches who become head coaches from their career is something that you touched on there. You know, as an assistant coach, you're responsible for this little bubble for the sprints and hurdles or the throws or whatnot.
Right.
And let's say you're the throws coach, you know, you're responsible for the throwers. And if the sprints and hurdles coach, their kids don't compete or they get in trouble, whatever, it's like, oh, well, head coach, that's his or her position. When you become the head coach, you're now responsible for the overall, all the culture. You have to be, what happens in the throws affects you, sprint coach, head coach. What happens in the jumps, distance, it's a magnitude that you're now responsible for the administration.
Right. I mean, even just being in charge of compliance for your team, you got 80, 60 to 100 people, depending on your school and program, and making sure everyone's cleared to practice, everyone's cleared to compete, making sure, and then monitoring, depending on the school that you're at, monitoring study hall, monitoring academic progress. All those are big deals, and they could be a job unto themselves. Obviously compliance has their own people and academic support has their own people, but you're the point person. Even if you delegate it to someone on your staff, hey, you're going to be in charge of study hall hours and compliance, the buck still stops at you. So again, I'd had experience with various aspects of different parts of the program at Syracuse and even at Smith College and other places, but it's different when, like, if something happens, the AD's calling you. You can't say, hey, you can't say I delegated to so-and-so. They don't care. Like, they didn't hire them to be in charge. You hired you to be in charge of that. So
it just shows another bad example that you did. Why'd you give that to that person?
Yeah. So understanding that the buck stops at you and that you have to have your finger in a lot of jars and you have to have good people underneath you, or not underneath you, but they work as your assistants and with you. They have to support you, not from an egotistical standpoint of view, but to support you so that they've got your back. And so one of the things I always felt like the job of an assistant is to ethically have their head coach's back. And, support them in doing things that are off the books. But like, if you got you have beef with your head coach, strong disagreements, that's a conversation with you and your head coach. Or you kind of commiserate amongst assistants, kind of had to get on my nerves today. But like you don't get that to the athletes. You definitely don't you don't bring that to the outside, because you don't know what they're going through. And I don't mean just personally, you don't understand the climate that they're dealing with and the challenges they're facing. And so that's why, I said even about Andy Roberts, some of the struggles we had, I got a much better understanding when I got that head coach. I was like, oh, I get it. I get why you might come in grumpy, be grumpy at 9:30 in the morning on a particular day, and the day hasn't even started. Like, you might have been on the phone call with a parent and administrator till 10:30, 11 o'clock last night. So I remember we would get back from meets, and he'd come in Monday and just be kind of grumpy. So I have 200 emails. And, like he would just be upset about the number of emails he had from when he left to when he came back. And it's like, I get it, I understand now, and, you can't reply to everybody. It's time. You just reply to this one. And, hey, I emailed you last week. It's like, yeah, but they think they're one of 5 and they're one of 300.
Right. I'm gonna put you on the spot, but I'm gonna give you time to think about it. That's the good segue. I'm gonna use her as my give you time to think about it. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Okay.
What are 3 things, and I'll let you use one of them being reading the book, Find the Winning Edge. What are 3 things you would suggest for an assistant coach that wants to be a head coach? What are 3 things they should do before they get the head coaching job? Now, while you're thinking of that, listener, if you hear in the background, if you hear a little one crying or screaming, that is, and I'm not apologizing for this, by the way, because this is who Kebba is, and this is what we do here in the Connections. We celebrate who people are in totality. That is Princess Leia. If you listened to the first recording back in episode 5, we found out how Kebba's kids became named. Now, no, his little boy's name is not Luke, but the little one is Princess Leia. So, and I give you no apologies if you hear her in the background. I love that. She's the cutest little thing in the world. So you, Mr. and Mrs. Listener, you just got to deal with it because we're home. We're with family, and that's part of life. So, okay, I'm done stalling. Okay. 3 things, and I said you could, if you wanted, have one of those 3 things be that book as a recommendation. What would you recommend for an assistant coach who wants to become a head coach?
So two things that come to mind right away. One is, if you're thinking that you want to be a head coach, part of the path to that is be a really good assistant. So, talk with your head coach about, hey coach, is there things that, not in an egotistical way, are there things I can be involved in with the program that might help you or make your job, easier, or different ways or better ways I can support you. And most assistant coaches, and I get it, thinking about, how can I make my kids better, faster, stronger, throw further, whatever, and recruiting, and and their group, and that's a lot of the job of the assistant. But kind of seeing how things run behind the scenes, seeing how things work in a department, as a head coach, or your supervisor, finding ways to be more involved in a way that your head coach will support. He may say, yeah, I'm really working on this project, I could use help here, or yeah, can you help me with academic affairs management? Can you help me with recruiting more? Can you help me XYZ, home meet management, whatever. So, because the more those things that you have experience with and understand what it takes to run a home meet, or what it takes to manage travel, managing those budgets and setting up, whether it's buses or vans or planes, or, a lot of times when even athletes become coaches, they're like, wow, I never knew that it was so much. They think, you just show up to practice and practice runs. It's like how much more there was to do during the day that's not about any X's and O's at all. And I think assistant coaches have that same kind of realization when they become head coaches. It's like, oh, I didn't realize travel was going to be this, or managing a budget and making sure I'm not over budget, or that if I have to fundraise, So depending on your program, there are going to be a lot of little things that make that program run. And the more that you can be involved with that and understand that and support your head coach, that's going to make their job easier, and they're going to make them more eager to support you in your path to become a head coach, but it's going to make you more qualified, and it's going to make your first year that much smoother.
When you finally get that opportunity, you'll have experience with either scheduling or home meet management or budgeting. Yeah, that's cool. That's
even if you don't know how to do it, you at least know, okay, this is something I need to get a handle on.
Good point. Yeah.
The other thing, though, that is crucially important, that's often overlooked, and I'm not saying it because I just did this course on it, is you need to have good mentors. A lot of coaches and then head coaches fail because they don't have good mentors. Tony Vini, when I was a head coach at Portland State, was a big mentor, and he had just left Portland State as a head coach to go back to UCLA. He's a UCLA alum, so he had that opportunity. And he had previously been a head coach at Cal State LA, DP school, and he had been a head coach at Portland State just before me, and so he had experience with the people I was dealing with and the environment, and so that was, he saved my butt many times. And then people like that. So, having good mentors can definitely save you, because you're going to make mistakes, but it's like how fast you recover from those mistakes, how you deal with those mistakes, and then how you deal with challenges and difficulty. If you don't have people you can rely on, people that you can trust, and people that will give it to you straight, you need people that will tell you, you're screwing this up. Don't, the way you're thinking about this, you need to do a complete 180, and not, because you're going to get fired if you do that, or you're going to piss these 5 people off if you do that, and then the next time something happens, they're going to say you got to go. And so, having people that will give it to you real and raw is really important. And Tony and people like Dan and people like Boo, and even Jim and those guys, and Ron Gregg, having colleagues and friends. So you have mentorship from above, and you have horizontal mentorship. You can either kind of gripe and groan with, but say, oh yeah, you're right, but this, or no, okay, but you're wrong, this is the way to do it, or this is why you keep running the same problem. So having those people in your life and in your career are really important. And then as a head coach at a school, if you're going to become a head coach, finding people in the department to mentor you. They've been at the school, they know how things work. I mean, things as simple as, how do I get a van? Because like the manuals they give you are this thick, and they expect you to read them, and you're not going to read them all and know it all. So, being friendly and okay, first day on the job, what are the first 3 things I need to do? And sometimes it's like, oh, you got to go get an ID. I mean, universities are bureaucratic in nature, and so bigger one, the bigger, the more. But so just knowing what to do and how to do it and who to ask for favors, and who, oh, the person before me ordered 20 jerseys. We need 25 this year. What do we do? Oh, so I'll go talk to so-and-so. They'll probably be able to help you. I mean, those kind of things become a big deal, or weight room hours, or weight room access, or pool access, or, so there's so much in being a head coach that, like my head coach and I, we disagree on things sometimes, and sometimes I'm frustrated and annoyed, but that's just the life of an assistant some days. But I give him a lot of leeway in terms of like my judgment of things, because I have an understanding of how much he's juggling, and the bandwidth emotionally, physically that can take on you, to where you might not be as attentive to something else that I might want, but he's got 5 other assistants that are all demanding of his time, attention,
That's a good point.
energy, that it's tough. It's tough. And so, those are things I would say.
And then 3, read the book.
Read books. Read.
Yeah, read. That's right. It's a good point too.
But Bill Walsh is a good person. People that write on leadership, and not that they have all the answers, but like Seth Godin has a good blog, a good blog he puts out every day, and that's got really good leadership advice. There's habit building and team building. Like Jeff Jansen has a lot of stuff on team culture and accountability and things like that. Like those are good resources.
What are you reading right now?
This just came in today from Fergus Conley. And
so he's holding up the book called The Happiness Handbook for High Achievers. I love the cover. I just realized what it was.
And so I've glanced through it, and I've read other stuff by Fergus. That's really good. I am reading, where is it? This book. That's really good. It's called The War. You might not be able to see the thing. About the fugitive slaves and how the history of fugitive slave laws in America brought us to the Civil War, and the compromises that were made, good and bad, and in between, in the context. So I'm reading that. And then I'm also reading this book that just came out called Begin Again. It's about James Baldwin and his impact on America and his voice and what he contributed. And then the last one that I'm reading right now is this one, The Advice Trap. Be humble, stay curious, and change the way you lead. And so I'm someone that tends to like to give a lot of advice. He has 2 books. Another one I think is called The Coaching Habit. Both of them are really good. But he's helping me, this book and his authorship's helping me to kind of reframe how I think about engagement with people and student athletes, parenting, where I fail a lot. And it's really good. Just kind of reframing how you come at people, interface with people, and it's lessons I need to keep applying. So,
do you read more than 1 book at a time?
I usually read about 6 to 8 books at a time.
Wow, I can't do that. I gotta.
That doesn't mean I'm reading each every day. I might read one for a couple of days,
right,
and then put it down and pick up something else. Like the Begin Again book I just got the other day, and the Happiness Habit just came in the mail today. And the Happiness Habit is like each of the sections are like 3 pages. So that's those. I might read a section or 2 and then put it down. Notes. The Begin Again book is kind of succinct chapters, so I might pick some of that. The War Before the War I started during the pandemic, and I'm almost done with it. And then I'm reading some comic books and things like that. And I'm also reading this. I just got this the other day. It's called The Biggest Bluff, and it's about patience and self-mastery and stuff like that. This guy, I'm not that far into it, but the people that did the reviews on the back, like Nate Silver and Daniel Pink and David Epstein, people and Gretchen Rubin, people I really respect. And so it got a lot of good reviews. And so, I might not finish that book till November. Now, kind of as I feel it. And there are other books I'm reading too, like, I'm going through How to Be Anti-Racist and stuff like that. And I've started that like in the winter, and I'm kind of just taking my time through it. So I kind of just pick up books as they kind of feel like I want to read something.
You are, I think the word is voracious, my man. Holy cow. I have to get a book and go all the way through it. And really, I'm much better at it when I'm traveling. So when I'm in an airplane, I'm in an Uber, I'm in a hotel, that's when I really,
100%.
Yes, I haven't been
100%.
real good. I think the last book I read was coming back from NCAA's. It was Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight story was my last one. Yeah.
Right.
Just tough.
So like I'm behind because home life during COVID is much different than traveling. So I get, buses to airports, time it meets. I would read a lot. My reading is probably down about 70%.
Yeah. So you mentioned something interesting there, and you recently did a whole course on mentorship. As you were talking about mentors, and I started thinking about my coaching career and now even in the private sector here in the business world, believing how important mentors are. And I started thinking of coaching. I was like, you know what? I was like, I don't know if I would call them mentors, but I grew up with Ron Grigg, Todd Lane, and Chris Baptista. We were all kind of the same age, kind of going through the coaching. I was like, but wait a minute, they're not older than me. So, and they were the same level as me. So it can't be mentors. But you talked about mentorship on a peer level too.
Right. So there's a podcast called Leave Your Mark podcast. And I'm drawing a blank on the name, but they did an episode with Stu McMillan and Dan Paff and who's the guy in Canada? I'm just drawing a blank on names right now, but it's Scott Livingston. That is a crutch in your life. It's his podcast. It's called Leave Your Mark. If you can see it.
Leave Your Mark. Okay.
But it's really good. He has, that episode on with those guys on it's about mentorship, but he has other episodes that are really good. And I know you guys, but like that podcast episode and the conversations I've been having with some people made me think like, yeah, you know what? Like mentorship is an unexplored area that we don't talk a lot about in terms of coaching development and support. And so what I did, Dan Paff and Bruce Schecksteiner have been extremely powerful, resourceful, helpful mentors to me, along with people like Tony Vini and Tony Wells and a few others. And so what I did was myself and Jim Benadigan co-taught a course on the mentorship and lessons that we learned from Dan Paff and Bruce Schecksteiner. So we did 2 days and we covered various themes and topics and areas of enlightenment that they've given us over the last 20 plus years. And so it was really cool. It was cool. Jim and I are very good friends. We're very close. And we both have been mentored by Dan and Boo. And we've gone and visited them and hung out at meets and restaurants. And wanted to honor them and to thank them, but also extol the virtues of good mentorship and the impact that it can make in your life and your career so that other people could one, learn some of the things we've learned, but also have that opportunity to find mentors or enrich their mentorship or be mentors to people or maybe both,
Knowing those two guys who are just giants in our industry, legends, if you will. And we talked about this in the first episode. While I don't know Dan, I've had several conversations, but I know Boo, I would have called him a mentor of mine as well in coaching. I just know those two, legacy is important to them. And I know it's important to them because they don't talk about it. Meaning they let their actions grow their legacy. Seeing guys like you and Jimmy V do that kind of lesson to others. So what you're doing is you're expounding their influence that they had over you. You're expounding that to more people. I know that had to be for two guys who have coached so many Olympians and All-Americans and records and things like that. That had to be one of their top proudest moments, was to see people like you and Jimmy V, who I respect so much as well, taking that lessons and giving it to more people. That lifts us all up, man. That's so cool. I love that you were doing that.
It was fun. It was really enriching and worthwhile, and I got a lot out of it just having to put it together and be thoughtful and organized around the topic. So it was good.
Yeah, I love that. So you go from East Coast Syracuse all the way over to Portland. Where do we go next?
So Portland was 5 years as head coach, and Portland's a great city. I had great kids there. And we had a lot of success. We went from being really, really bad to pretty good. Like the most points we had scored was like 30 something points. And then by the time I left, we had scored 150 something points at our conference meet.
Wow.
And Tony Vini had set a lot of the groundwork. So like he kind of was the fertilizer, but didn't get to see the fruits of his labor because he went to UCLA. But a lot of things that I was able to do was because they were like, when I say they were bad when I got there, they were really bad when he got there. And so he did a lot of the heavy lifting for those couple of years. And then I was able to come in and make me look good, kind of thing. And so had a lot of fun. But by the time I left Portland State, I was on my third athletic director and on my third or fourth sports supervisor. And so people had hired me that, I was like, okay, I want to work with them in their vision. They had been gone and the department was changing. And I felt like some of the promises or ideas that I came in with and had been promised to me by the people that hired me, because I felt like those things were being broken My budgets were being reduced, things like that. And I was like, it's not for me. Like I didn't think I was going to continue to enjoy it, even though I liked the kids. So I had an opportunity to go to UTEP. Boo called me one day when I was at Junior Olympics and said, hey, what do you think about UTEP? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, Calvin's leaving to go to Miami. And would you be interested? I was like, yeah, I'd be interested. And so he talked to Coach Kitchens. Coach Kitchens talked to me. And, 6 weeks later, I was at UTEP.
Wow, man.
Yeah. And so I went from head coach to being the jumps and multis coach at UTEP.
And you also went from freezing cold to lots of rain to unbearable heat.
Yeah, everything was different from, like a really built up downtown in Portland with lots of green and public transportation to the downtown El Paso is not, everything's really spread out in El Paso. So it's not like a centralized area. That's one. The public transportation, like there's no trains or anything, just buses, and they don't really go everywhere. And then it's very brown because you're in the desert. So it was like shock. So that was UTEP when I got there, and UTEP was extremely different in that when I got there in 2008. Like they hadn't offered, it was a very international program. So they hadn't offered a male US athlete in like 3 years when I got there.
Wait, I'm sure I didn't hear that right. They hadn't offered a male US high school athlete in any event.
In any event, I believe, I remember I was sitting there in 2010 thinking like, man, like we had so. We ended up, by the time I left, we'd offered a couple of US athletes when Mika took over. And it wasn't that Coach Kitchens didn't want them. Like it was very, very difficult to get very high caliber male US athletes to come to El Paso, Texas, to UTEP because they were getting offers from Texas and Texas Tech and Florida, wherever else. But internationally, Coach Kitchens had amazing connections. And UTEP has an amazingly rich legacy of international student athletes, Olympians and champions. Oh, yeah. Cameron, and I mean, on and on and on and on. I mean, like there's too many names to mention. But so that was kind of their strategy to be successful. I mean, athletes from the Caribbean, Barbados, and Obadele Thompson went there. But we had athletes from Curacao and athletes from Nigeria and Kenya and France and Finland and I mean, all over the world. It was really, so when I got there in 2008, I got there after the Olympics. UTEP had the most track and field athletes at the Olympics of all U.S. universities.
Really?
Obviously, yeah. So that's how diverse they were.
That's a cool little track fact.
Yeah. So,
wow.
So it was very different to me. Like, the recruiting budget was relatively small. We had these BlackBerry cell phones. I don't know how we did it. I don't know. Like the international calls was like ridiculous. Like that was how we recruited. Email and BlackBerries. Like Paul Ehring was a distance coach, the 88 Olympic champion, 800 he had gone to UVA. And every summer he would go to Kenya and he would spend like 2 weeks there and he'd come back and he'd have some people for the next year. Or even maybe he might set something up for the next year. And Mika would always have contacts in Europe, and he was an NCAA champion at UTEP in the mid-90s in the hammer throw. And he was from, man, I'm drawing a blank, but he's from Europe, and he had connections. And so he recruited from there, Greece and Hungary and Scandinavia. I mean, he always had international high-level throwers. And in the sprints and hurdles, we had people from Latvia, and we had people from Curacao. We had people from Nigeria. And on the women's side, we had a few U.S. athletes on scholarship. So that was a little bit different, maybe a third of that. But it was very international, very different recruiting, lots of transfers. People would transfer from four-year universities overseas to El Paso.
That had to be, with people from literally around the world, had to be a really educational time for you, learning different cultures and even languages and how people think about events differently in other countries.
Yeah, it was really different. Hey, Betty.
Mm-hmm.
It was really different to even just see how the team was structured, how the team was run, because it was it wasn't quite like a hired gun mentality, you know, but it was more, it was more of a mentality, we're gonna find good people, we're gonna coach them, but we're gonna kind of stay out of the way. And I'm oversimplifying by a lot, but that was, then we're gonna more than we're gonna find people in high school and develop them to become great. Was that we're gonna find really good people and develop the talent to the next level. But it wasn't the normal recruit a good high school kid and make them a lot better. It was we're gonna find people that are really good and get them in and give them an opportunity, and that was how the program ran. So the athletes had a lot more input into things than I'd ever been used to. I mean, in some things, and there was a lot more autonomy. I'm not to say they were disrespectful, but it was very different. So, yeah, it was unique. And so I got there, and Blessing Okabari was there, and she had won the Olympic bronze medal that summer with Calvin, and she had wanted to go to Miami with Calvin. Coach Kitchens didn't release her, so she was pissed off with everybody. So I got the brunt of it at first, and so
oh no,
we really didn't get along for about 4 months. You know, it was terrible. Then it worked out and it was great. But she was a jumper, she wasn't a sprinter, and I wasn't the sprints coach. I was the jumps multis coach the first 2 years. I became the women's sprints coach my third year, in addition to being the jumps and multis coach. But you know, the second year, my first year there, she went to NCAAs in 100, long jump, triple jump, and relay. But we were doing some testing and workouts in the fall, and I was like, you can sprint. And you know, what I tell people always is, you know, I did not create her talent. You know, she, like I said before, I think she was second at NCAAs the year before I got there, and she won an Olympic bronze medal. That's a pretty high level of achievement. What I think I did is allow her to see that she could become a very elite sprinter, and I helped her use those abilities, you know. And so I will take some credit for that, but in terms of talent finding and things like that, no, she was super elite when I got there. You know, I'd never coached anybody who had jumped anywhere near that far.
So, how many years were you there?
3 years, 2008 to 2011.
What was your favorite memory from, it doesn't have to necessarily be from the school, but El Paso, UTEP, what's your favorite, when you think back your fond time there, what was the most impactful memory for you?
My favorite, I mean, I think, I'll tell you two things. One's kind of skips on your question. The first one was, before I got to UTEP at Portland State, they had given us some money to bring our team down. So, you know, I had no idea that Calvin was going to leave or anything. And Calvin and Mika had invited us down, and I think they gave us hotels and some money. So we flew down, and the whole team was there. And after the meet was over, the coaches kind of hung out and, you know, had some food and drinks like that. And they had these, the trainers' cards to use to, like, they bring, you know, water coolers out and stuff like that to meet stuff the trainers always kind of are riding in at track meets.
Oh, the carts. Yeah.
The carts. So we had a bunch of carts, and Calvin and myself and my assistants and the other people on UTEP staff, we had kart races around the football stadium at night. So that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
That's a great memory. Yeah.
Yeah. But we had no idea. I had no idea we were going to be there. You know.
Yeah, even funnier that the next year you're there.
But, so that's one, just a pass on UTEP. But the other one is Blessing winning NCAAs. That was indoor, especially because it took a lot to get to that. You know, the year before, after, you know, so in 2008 she wins the Olympic bronze. She's run up at NCAAs, and then the next year in 2009 she goes in as the favorite in the long jump. She's, you know, rated to score high in the triple jump, rated to be very, you know, do very well in 100. And, you know, the president of her federation came over. The national meet was at Arkansas that year? I think so. Anyway, the meet was a disaster. She took ninth in the 100. She made the final, and I think she got 8th or 9th. She scored 1 point in the long jump, and the best event she got like 5th triple jump. You talk about disaster. You know, now I think I can coach. And it's like, well, shoot, you took this person that was this, and, you know, she had done well all year, like knocked it out the park, and I thought she might score like 25 points. And
she can't score 2.5.
Yeah, it was like, you know, her worst event was a triple jump, and she got 5th. and she got like 8th and 8th in the long jump in the 100. I was like, man. So, my ego took a bruising. She was distraught. So we get back to UTEP. A couple days later, we sit down and have a heart-to-heart. A lot of it, we realized she was able to express to me was she was very scared and nervous and felt a lot of pressure that I didn't anticipate and set her up for. And so, we got back to work to get ready for the Nigerian trials and world championship that year and so on. But so it went a lot better after that. But then now going into the next year, same pressure, but she had a lot more confidence. And knowing where the Achilles heels were, the weak spots, had a better idea of how to prep for the championship meet. So seeing her go at Arkansas, so it was Arkansas because this ties into a Star Wars thing. So, I kind of feel like the big failure was at Arkansas Outdoor in 2009, and then to go to Arkansas Indoor in 2010 and win the 16 long jump. No woman in Division I history had ever done that. But, in Empire Strikes Back, Luke has this big failure at the cave, and I felt like we were going back to the same spot to resurrect ourselves. And I felt like, okay, let's go back, let's try to build a different history. And so I always felt very appreciative and proud that we were able to go back to the same place and triumph together. So.
I always go back to, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to our conversation with Brooks Johnson, okay. But he said something in there that I've used it now for several of our conversations with other coaches. He talked about, if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. And so, and what he was reflecting as when people from the outside say, "Oh, that athlete should be doing X," or that, if I was coaching that person, I would do Y and Z. You had to really, you and Blessing actually, right? You come back from that meet, you're at the bottom of the bottom. Really, that was unexpected. Right. And other people are probably chirping like, "Man, look what he did." Took, get Calvin back here, right? And you guys, had your own. People from the outside had no clue what was going on. You guys were able to have the talk and continue to build that trust. And eventually, look what happened. I mean, the good news is, spoiler alert, it really rose up to the top. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So, did you go from UTEP to Harvard?
Yeah. So, after my second year, Coach Kitchens retired. Mika became the throws coach, became the head coach. So I had one more year at UTEP, and like many mid majors, there are budget things, and I was kind of unhappy with my pay, and a couple other things in the program, and also like I didn't feel like I fit the same way I'd felt at other places. It just, although there are certain things that I enjoyed, and I think there were good people and all those things, like I just felt like I feel out of place here. And again, like there are a lot of things I enjoyed, a lot of good people in the program and associated with the program. But a friend of mine, Brian Fetzer, called me. He said, "Hey, what do you think about Harvard?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, tell me more." Because, I knew Harvard, and I'm from the East Coast. I competed at Harvard when I was in high school. I went to Colby College, went to Andover Phillips Academy. So I'd been around that area a lot. We competed in Boston at Tufts and BU a lot when I was in college. Anyway, he's like, "Well, and Brian was the recruiting coordinator as well for Harvard. He said, we got this person coming in, and this person, and this person. We're doing this and this and this." And anyone that knows Brian is eternally optimistic, to a fault, and I love him. But
I was just on the phone with him yesterday, and I would agree that it's still today.
Right. So I was like, "Oh wow, okay." Because you think Harvard track and field, especially then, they've had good people and they have a legacy. But it was like, why would I leave this to come there? And once he started explaining to me, I was like, "Oh, okay, this sounds interesting." And then we talked, and then I talked with the head coach, and then we started the formal process. And like 6 weeks later, I was at Harvard, kind of thing. And so I came in, and I was the short sprints coach, the hurdles coach, and the long jump and triple jump coach.
Men and women?
Say again, both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And Fetzer was the long sprints coach, the multis coach, and the vertical jumps coach. And then Fetzer left. He got the head coaching job at UVA, so he left at the end of the first semester. So I then absorbed. I had all the sprints and hurdles, all the long and triple jump, and the heptathlon.
Oh.
In January, we hired Brenner, and the first year, Brenner had vertical jumps, decathlon, the 800 group, and he ended up coaching a couple of the football guys. So that year, I think Brenner had, he had an Ivy League champion in the men's 60, he had an Ivy League champion in the women's 800, and he had an Ivy League champion in the pole vault.
That's pretty unique. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
yeah. And so
Dang.
anyway, so once we got through that first year, then we ended up hiring Mark Rangicotti. Mark had the men's sprints and hurdles. I kept the men's horizontal dumps for a year, and then he got the men's horizontal dumps as well.
So you coached all the women sprints, hurdles, and horizontals,
and heptathlon.
relays. Oh, and heptathlon. Okay.
Heptathlon. Yeah, I've had to heptathlon since my first year as well, after Fetzer left.
Do you coach the heptathlon as in you coach all 7 events, or do you have Darcy do the throws or anything? Or do you keep it all?
Yeah, I kind of keep it all. I kind of coach them all, so we have continuity.
Yeah. Kind of 2 different ways of doing it, and
Right.
I was never good enough to do that. I had, like I'd maybe coach their 100, and I had 9 other coaches for everything. Right. So what's it like? You've been there. I think this would have been 9th season, if
9 year, coming up on year 10.
Yeah. So what's it like coaching at Harvard and being in Boston? Such a great city, and obviously the success you guys have had. It's been a lot of work. So what's it like there?
It's mostly wonderful, and challenging. And most jobs are kind of like that. What I tell people is that, like, in any job, if you're happy 85, 90% of the time, that's about as good as you're going to get, because every job has a challenge. And most of the time, I'm happy 85, 90% of the time, and that's what's kept me here. I've had a few opportunities to do other things in other places, and there are a couple of combination of things that have kept me here. So one is that it's in Boston. I'm a New Yorker. I'm from the Bronx. But Boston is a pretty cool 2nd, 3rd city. Like it's got really good, like the food scene in Boston compared
Unbelievable.
to it's like tremendously better. Like they make good pizza now. Boston used to have terrible pizza. They've got good pizza and lots of good restaurants and good food. Secondly is that there's a lot to do. Like, I'm in the music and books, people that know me. And in Boston and around Boston in my time here, I've seen Stevie Wonder twice, I've seen Prince, I've seen Janet Jackson, I've seen Jay-Z 3 times.
Whoa.
Maxwell. I've seen what's else I've seen? I've seen Ron Carter, a jazz artist. I've seen Michelle Farrell. I've seen Najee. I've seen Walter Beasley, and on and on and on. All in or near the Boston area, and other some places are more I wouldn't be able to do that, and it's usually pretty easy to get to. I've gone to some Red Sox games. I've gone to see the Bruins. I've gone to the Celtics game. The kids, we can go like the puppet show theaters, and we go to Disney on Ice and things like that. And there's a lot to do. And you can be really urban, or you can be really kind of in the woodsy, outdoorsy type stuff all really quickly. And so the city itself, the area, offers me a lot. And I would say this, again, as a New Yorker, like when I was younger, living in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Lebanon, Illinois, and having gone to college in Waterville, Maine, you'd be like, it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, there's nothing to do. Or, the closest thing is 30, 40, 50 minutes away, like from Waterville, you're going to Portland, Maine, or from Lebanon, you're trying to get to St. Louis, or from Mount Pleasant, you're trying to get to Iowa City. So like, I live about 20 minutes from Boston in Waltham, and, I do a lot, but I'm not living the fast life. I'm 48 years old. And so there's enough to do, but like, I don't need stuff open until 3 a.m. Like when I used to come to Boston when I was in college and hang out with my friends, like the train station was shut down like 1 o'clock. If you were going to come back from like, being out, you had to catch a taxi. And I'd be like, what is this? New York, the trains run all night. What kind of city is this? But I'm not out till 3 a.m. So the train stopped running at 1 or 2. No big deal to me at 48, So I think maybe that's why I love it so much too, is because there's way more than enough to do. And I'm not out till 3 anymore, and you have Uber now too, which makes it easier. But
yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So that's the backdrop of what makes Harvard so enjoyable. On top of that, as we talked about in the first call, I have a education mindset background where that's really important to me, and it's a place where I feel like I fit in with that ethos. And Harvard obviously is tremendously academic. They've got a long, rich history of that. Being one of the preeminent institutions in the world. So the type of people that we're attracting to compete for us here, and the people that are taking classes here have that interest. Have a high level of interest in that stuff. So we talk a lot about track. Track is the main thing that I do at my job. But with the student athletes, we're talking about people like Cornell West and bell hooks and, Angela Davis and politics. And one time I got in trouble at Portland State for talking to my team about politics. Someone mistook what I said and kind of twisted it. I believe they twisted it on purpose. My associate AD was, I had to make an apology to the team, and it was really frustrating because I really, to my soul, feel like what I said was very straightforward and not at all, it wasn't that controversial. What I said was sometimes I don't like white people because, and someone on the bus had said, a female had said sometimes she doesn't like men because of sexism. I said, yes, sometimes I don't like white people because of racism. And it wasn't a comment that I don't like white people at all. It was like, yeah, I have moments where it's like, it's really frustrating. And my associate AD was like, well, you can't say that. And I was like, anybody that was in that conversation completely understood the context, and the people that brought it to you kind of trying to have it out for me because, I was very careful in the conversation I had with them to say, this is not a thing that was every day all the time. It was in context of what that person had said. And it was very clear that it wasn't a hateful type of thing, and so that kind of annoyed me. But so at Harvard, you can have those types of conversations that, again, you're not going to try to be insensitive, but, there's nuance and there's background and support for a diverse set of ideas, I feel like. And so I enjoy that. And I have kids that are sociology majors and psych majors and philosophy majors and economics majors and neuroscience, things like that, and that makes it enjoyable. That's part of what makes it enjoyable.
Earlier we had a fun little track trivia. One of my favorite track trivias is who owns what school did the athlete go to, who owns the women's indoor 200-meter collegiate record? Because most people would guess, the LSUs and Texas and Florida's, whatever, but it's an athlete from Harvard. And I think that we mentioned earlier, Gabby, what's it like, from the outside looking in? We all see Harvard. We see Harvard on, Good Will Hunting and all this kind of stuff. Recruiting, is your recruiting pool just like there's 10 kids a year that you can go after because of grades? What's it like to recruit at Harvard?
So the recruiting pool is narrow and wide. And what I would say is that it's narrow because, people have to have certain basic minimums. There is no real minimum. It's not like you have to have a 3.6 or else, but, there are general guidelines of people that are going to tend to be accepted for admission at Harvard. And so even that was a surprise when I first got there. So, we're looking at certain, because, I'd been at Smith, gone to Kobe, Fetzer had come from Cal. And so he was there before me. And I was like, hey, what about this kid? No, it's not going to happen. Like, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, hey, I go, they're pretty good. Like, kids that you knew were smart enough to do the work, but weren't going to pass the admissions standard, basically. Mm-hmm. Standard very loosely, but just, given the thousands and thousands and thousands of applicants, they were going to be, not in the top part of the applicant pool. Having said that, so like Fetzer would be like, yeah, I thought the same thing when I was at Cal. I was at Cal, I kind of get what was at Harvard. And it gives you some understanding and insight, but it's still that next level up, I would say. But recruiting is unique at Harvard and schools like Harvard, I should say, because, you're slicing out 90% of the population plus from the get-go. Like,
I was going to say 90, you're being a little generous.
but a big swath, because it's just not going to happen. And so sometimes I have to have conversations with student athletes, families, and coaches saying, look, I understand that you can easily get into 90% of the schools in the US. It's going to be very challenging at Harvard. And I try to say it because I don't want them to think I'm being elitist or pompous. It's just saying that, look, yes, you are very smart. You're accomplished. The bar is just a little bit higher here, and so sometimes you got to have those difficult conversations. So once you narrow it down to people that, one, have the academic credentials and background, and two, have the athletic credentials and background, it gets very small because, and I'm a D3 student athlete. I went to NESCAC school. NESCAC is a very elite academic conference, athletic conference. So there are a lot of kids that would be superstars in NESCAC that contact us that don't quite have the athletic credentials to compete for us in a way that would be very impactful athletically. And so that's sometimes that's a tough thing too, because a lot of times people think Ivy League is Division I light. And I tell people all the time, like, we compete against LSU and we compete against Texas and Florida and whoever else. Like, that's our competition. Like, we're trying to be the best that we can be within our parameters and given guidelines. So I'm never thinking like, oh, I only have to beat Yale or Princeton. I'm trying to think, how good can I help you become? How can I help you close the gap between where you are and what your potential is? And then, what does that take? And that's kind of been my MO wherever I've been, but especially at Harvard, because I don't want people to think of it as Division I light. We're Division I track and field. We're in the Ivy League. We're going to have a balanced approach to academic and athletic enrichment and accomplishment, but it's a balance. It's not academics. Because people, when I first got here, especially the people in my group, they would say, oh, coach, I have to do this. Coach, I have this. Coach, I have this. I was like, whoa, we got practice. We got this. Yeah, but academics first. And I was like, I'm pretty smart. Like, I'm not genius. Like, I know the people like Dan and Boo are like uber smart, but I'm pretty smart. And I went to pretty good schools, throughout my life. So I know what academic achievement is like. And I was like, look, yeah, it's Harvard. I get that what it is, but like y'all got into school. So they didn't accept you because you couldn't do the work. And so I kind of had to hold people, feel like I had to hold people accountable. Like, yeah, like you're not gonna kid a kidder. Like I wasn't born yesterday. So like, this paper that's due, you tell me you need to miss practice for, the professor didn't assign it to you yesterday. There's a syllabus. And they assigned it to you 3 weeks ago. And they said, so like, this is poor planning on your part. So we had to kind of have those kind of conversations. And like, if you tell me, hey, coach, 3 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from now, I got this big paper due. I'm doing this, I'm meeting with so and so. On that Monday, can I have a shorter practice? I think I need to have a shorter practice. Can I do practice, whatever? Can I do practice on my own? That's a much different conversation than Monday morning call, coach, I need this practice. Da, da, da. Now, you might call me Monday morning because you didn't do what you're supposed to do or something happened or whatever. And you might still miss practice, but there's probably a lecture coming as well from me, some frustration on my part that's going to be expressed, because you can't tell me you have high level goals and then have a disorganized life with regard to those goals. So I certainly have kids that once in a while will need to miss a practice, and we've taught, last Wednesday they told me that this Thursday they need to miss practice, or this Friday. That's not a big deal, and that happens, amongst the group relatively often. I might have one kid a week that misses one practice or has to have a shortened practice, but I've got 20 people in my group, so no big deal. That might happen with an athlete once or twice a semester. But when I first got here, it was like people were willy-nilly, and I was like, this is for the birds. Like, we're never going to be great if we operate like this. And so, we kind of got it to a point where like the people understood that, like, yeah, academics are super important. Like, most people in our program are never going to be professional athletes, and that's perfectly fine. But let's not shortchange ourselves. We're going to let's chase a degree that's meaningful, and let's put a lot of time, energy into our academic preparation and work and be proud of it. Well, let's do the same thing on the track too. And that's kind of my approach. And I think that's part of why we were able to turn things around and been able to be a high achieving group within the Ivy League, and beyond.
I always was impressed when I was a kid. I don't know if they still do it today, but I'd read the USA Today, and they would have like the all academic football team, and it would be all divisions. And so I'd always, go through, and I would just look for the schools, and I'd get to MIT or Harvard, and it would be such and such, the offensive lineman, nuclear physics, and I was like, man, that's impressive, because that kid is not only studying something I'm from Alabama, I could barely spell nuclear physics, but is also doing the time commitment for a college sport. So I just imagine, the kids that are on your team, like, what kind of majors are they? Like, are we going in and doing general study? I don't even know if Harvard has general studies. English, and I'm not saying anything bad about English, or they.
Yeah, basically everything. So one of the things that I enjoy about Harvard mostly is because there's times where it's frustrating, but like the degree that people get, not just because of the name, but because of the work they put in, is meaningful here. Other places where kids were pushed into general studies, kids that want to do nursing and scientific things, they were pushed into certain majors, like, oh, that won't work, or pushed into certain class schedules and things like that. And that was always frustrating. I don't think that student athletes should just take classes whenever they want, however they want, never be at practice. Like that's bad for organization too. There's got to be a balance to it, and but no, we have people in my group and in our team that are spread across all 48 concentrations at Harvard, from neuroscience, biology, economics, psychology, architecture, philosophy, English, and on and on and on. I mean, there's never an instant we tell kids, you can't do this major, you can't do this concentration at Harvard. And what we do ask is that they be thoughtful in their course selection. Harvard offers like 3,000 courses. At Harvard, you can take 32. So you say that, look, you're gonna take 32 courses. You're not gonna be able to take every single one you want. There's gotta be a little bit of give and take at times to accommodate your desire to be a high level student athlete as well. Doesn't mean you can't take this or can't take that, but like if every time that push comes, you're always choosing things that are going to diminish your ability to function in track and field, that's problematic in the same way as if we were talking about all track and field all the time. There has to be that balance to it.
Well, I'm so impressed. It's one thing, first of all, the whole Ivy League has some tremendous athletes, but, Harvard seems to have, like you said, you're competing against, it doesn't matter if you're in the Ivy League, you're in the SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, you know what, we're going to line up and our goal is to beat you.
Right.
And if we don't, we'll just be your boss one day. So that's all good. You guys have done a great job there. And like I said, my favorite trivia question is all, because I got to see Gabby do it too. So that was always like, I was like, holy crap, man, no one would have predicted this. That's just so awesome. As we start wrapping up here, something else that I wanted to talk to you about. I mentioned, we first sat down in January. 6 months later, we had no idea how the world was going to change, and not just in sport, right? We didn't get our outdoor championships, we didn't get an outdoor season, but a lot inside of culture has happened for many, many different reasons. On the 28th of May, you had I think it was 30 seconds. You just had a quick, I saw it on Twitter. I don't know if it got posted to other places. You had this emotional message, almost as if you were talking to yourself, to be real frank, that went viral, if you will. They talk about things that go viral. I looked at it again today to remind myself of it, and it's got some 30,000 views on it. So I'll categorize that as going viral. It was a real emotional, and the reason I think it went viral is because it was real authentic, Kebba. It was, it was real authentic. You spoke about fatherhood. You spoke a lot about your oldest child. I think 12 years old.
Yeah, I have a daughter that's 22 as well, but he's my middle child.
Oh, right. Okay, that's right. We were talking about Malcolm in this video, and just with all the things going on with police brutality and racial injustice, talk us through what was your, if you haven't seen it, you got to go on Kebba's Twitter page. If you're a parent, you can't, I don't know how you can see a father talk about his child and not get emotional about it. I don't care what race, color, creed you are. I just don't know how you can. As a father of two, I can't fathom. Talk us through what that message was, why you did it, and what you hope results will come from it.
Yeah, so the night before I posted it, my son Malcolm, I on an Instagram story, and he posted like Justice for Ahmaud. And I was like, he doesn't usually post a lot of social political stuff. He's 12, on his page, and that's okay. Like, that's fine. And we haven't had tons of deep discussions about that type of stuff. He knows he's named after Malcolm X. He knows that Malcolm X is a racial social justice superhero. He understands that Black and brown people marched, died, fought, struggled for him to have the rights, privileges, and lifestyle that he has now. He has a basic understanding of things, but he it's not a deep understanding, that I would say I have at 48 as an adult. So I was like, oh, wow. And when I saw that on his page, so he was hungry, and I said, hey, let's go get some food. And so we went to Burger King and we got some food. We sat in the parking lot, and I was like, hey, I saw your page, how are you feeling? And he's like, I'm okay. And I asked him how, and so we had a conversation about that. And what I said to him is like, I want you to be safe. I hadn't had the talk, any Black parent will tell you to talk about how to interface with police and criminal justice type system type things. I said, listen, I want you to be safe. And the reason I said it is we live in a mostly white middle-class area, and 12, 13, 14-year-olds get into mischief. Like, I'm not excusing it, saying like, you might be with your friends and, hey, let's take these potato chips from the store, and you run out. You're not a high-level criminal. You shouldn't do it, but those are the types of things that people sometimes get into. And, my vantage point is that he wouldn't get the same perspective as his friends possibly if the cops get called, or they run out the store and the cops say, hey, stop. His friends might keep running. If he keeps running, that could end his life, you know? And, you know, I just said, listen, I said, if something happens, you make a mistake, or you're in a situation where you're dealing with the police, and, you know, my son he's a little nervous, especially if he's accused of something that he hasn't done, or he feels he's being unjustly accused. So even if the cops stop and say, hey, we want to ask you some questions, you know, we saw you there, or this, that, you know, anything that might happen, it would be a nervous type of experience. I get nervous getting pulled over for a speeding ticket. So, you know, a young person like him who's, you know, he's a preteen, he drives you crazy, but he's a very sweet soul. I could see his nervousness make him shake, or make him even possibly cry, or make him interact with the police in a way that might make them feel suspicious because of the biases they bring to that interaction. And the thought of him being harmed because of that is terrifying to me. And so I said to him, you know, if you're involved with the police in any way, even if you made a mistake, if you took some chips or a cupcake or a soda, or you're running with your friend, I said, be safe. I said, don't worry, because he's the kind of person that would worry about mom and dad and be really mad at me. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna tell them? I said, look, I'd rather deal with you and me being upset with each other, and me being, you having to put you on punishment, than you being dead. You know, I said, I'd rather deal with you being in trouble with mom and I than us not having you around. And that's how I strongly feel, because whatever happens, whatever he might have done, we'll get through it. But if the police overreact, mistreat him, make the wrong supposition, whatever thing that could end his life, or you know, there's no coming back from that. So I want him just to, you know, and I'm not saying the people that have been killed and brutalized and mistreated have done anything to deserve it. I'm not trying to say that at all, but I'm saying, like, you don't have to do anything wrong to, as a Black person, a brown person in this society, to have very severe consequences or misreactions that can negatively impact your life, if not end your life. You know, like thinking that somebody is dead over a counterfeit $20 bill is insane. You know, and selling cigarettes and all those kind of things. You know, like, you know, is it illegal? Sure, but damn, like that shouldn't end your life. You know, not signaling in traffic, that shouldn't put you in jail and you're dead 3 days later. So, you know, and this is a biased opinion. This is a biased outlook. You know, in general, I'm trying to minimize my interaction, my family's interaction with the criminal justice system in any way, shape, or form, because you don't want it to go sideways. And I'm not saying all police are bad and this and the other, but like, it just is, the odds are against you. And so so anyway, that was the context of the conversation we had. The next morning I needed to do something, go get something. I was up and I couldn't sleep that night. And I was like, I'll go take care of the business I got to take care of now. So I was driving, pull out the driveway, get about 2 blocks away, and I just started crying. And at first I was like, you know, like, I'm not afraid to cry, but I was just like, why am I crying? And it just hit me, and I was bawling, and I just recorded that as a release, and I posted it. I didn't have any expectation that it would impact anybody. It was more that I just need to release this because I'm going through it right now. And that was like at 6:30 in the morning. For the next 4 hours, I was crying on and off every 20 minutes, you know, and the outpouring, what I said to people, what I've said to some people is the outpouring of support and understanding, and people that said they opened their eyes, people that said they understood, or that they were an ally, has been very impactful to me and very meaningful to me. People say, how you doing? How you doing? And I would say, like, you know, I feel a lot better, in that it's nice to know there are a lot of people out there that understand and that kind of get it and that are supportive and are trying to raise their families and their children and their spheres of influence to be different. Racism didn't change in those 48 to 72 hours, but the acknowledgement of what I was feeling and going through from people, Black, white, male, female, across the world, was like, wow. It's like, you know, one, I knew you're not alone in it, and that also there are people working hard to dismantle white supremacy, and that's impactful. So it's not that it's dismantled or gone, or that those two realities about my son have changed, but there's glimmers of hope, is how I feel. And that was before things really took off in terms of the worldwide movement about this. So it was like a few days before, because my reaction was really just to having to have that talk with him, and the idea of something happening to him, and then things took off a few days after that. So that's the story behind that.
Yeah, it was real impactful. I think the reason it was so impactful, the amount of impact it had was, it wasn't just a black man talking about his black son. So that there's one part I'll never know. You know, I don't, for good or bad, I don't have to have that conversation with my kid.
Mm-hmm.
But it also was a father to a son, and I think moms could see that to their kids as well. That's
Right.
where the impact, you know, as a father, it impacted
Right.
me that, you know, another man, and beyond that, it's a man that I know and I love and I trust, but another man has to feel this way about his kid, that this could, I mean, I know how, you think about your kid, that's the
Right.
worst thing anybody could go through, right? Is having to
Right.
bury their own children. I just can
Right.
never imagine that. And so that you have to concern yourself with that, out of all the other things in this world that I want you to concern yourself with, driving
Right.
safe,
Yeah.
you know, that's where, for me, the impact was. And, you know, you read through, there's lots of people, as you mentioned, that commented on there and said, hey, I'm with you, I stand with you, I kneel with you, I see you, I validate you. I can only imagine, because again, I know your network, you know, you're a wildly popular person, that there had to be 10x the number of people that texted you and called you to check in with you.
Right. And, you know, and the people said, yeah, you know, I feel you, I've been there, you know, we're going to get through it. And it really helped. It made an impact. And I'm not naive, but I'm hopeful, you know, that things will continue to progress, you know, sooner rather than later, and that the work that's being done, the struggles that are being done, and the protests, you know, will make an impact, so that, you know, Black lives can truly matter, that brown lives can truly matter, and all the intersections and subcategories of those. Because, you know, what I tell people is, like, we're not asking for anything special. We just want to live. You know, we just want to live. We want to have the same opportunities and the same life outcomes that are afforded to everyone. The life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing, I think is a great thing to aspire to. We aspire to that too. You know, I'm not saying all Black people think alike, but I'm saying, like, me as a person, me as a Black man, me as a Black member of my household, you know, tradition, like, I aspire to that very much. And I want my children to be able to have that. And, you know, you think that was 1776, we're in 2020, and we're still trying to make that a reality for a lot of different types of people, not just Black and brown people, you know, gay, lesbian, trans, so on and so forth, you know. But you would think it wouldn't take that long to get this figured out. I understand that there are forces working against us, but you're like, damn, that was 1776, you know, and we're in 2020. And, you know, think about my mother and my grandmother, and, like, the struggles they had and what they fought and they marched for, and, you know, and before them, you know, obviously. And that you think, like, can't we figure this out? You know, can't we decide as a people, as a country, that why? Because it's not just hate. People, and that's what I'm going to say. People, like, it's not just hateful hearts and minds. It's the mechanism and the organization and the positive effects. You know what I want to say? The benefits that compile and accrue from white supremacy that have to be dismantled. You know, and so changing hearts and minds is one aspect of it, but it's very multifaceted. It's very layered. It's very pervasive, and it's gonna take a huge effort to dismantle it, because a lot of it operates without hate, a lot of it operates without malintent, and that people are starting to understand that, and that's just as important, if not more important, than changing hearts and minds, because the policies and the structures that uphold white supremacy and that generate and accrue the benefits of white supremacy, that have to be dismantled for people to really have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
To help provide value to people. That's one of our big goals here for the podcast. Is, again, it was called Connections for a reason, to help connect people together, and really to see how a lot of us are the same in some aspects. We all have our uniqueness, but we have a lot of commonalities, and vice versa. So two of the things that I could maybe suggest if you're listening right now and you just want to know what are some ways that I can learn, how do I learn some of these things? If I've been in my own bubble, how do I can start? One is I would recommend, I don't know if you've seen this one or not. Have you seen, it's on Netflix called 13, I think it's called.
Excellent.
It is excellent. I rarely share on Facebook what I watch on Netflix normally because I'm just watching Office reruns over and over. But that was one of, it might be the only show that I've actually like shared and was like, I was actually kind of speechless when it's all wrapped up. It's mind blowing.
Right.
And the other one is something you alluded to when you gave the examples of, selling single cigarettes and $20 counterfeits. You mentioned blinkers, your turn signal. And I'm blanking on her name, but one of the people that I have learned a lot from is a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. I think you're fairly well versed. I'm doing everything I can to get him on the show as well, because he actually was a track runner back in the day. He loves track. But Malcolm Gladwell runs a podcast called Revisionist History.
My favorite podcast.
It's awesome, right?
It's incredible.
I love that podcast. One of the episodes he did was on the young lady who was down in Houston who got pulled. I'm actually glossing over it tremendously, but got pulled over because she didn't put her turn signal on. She didn't, in my opinion, she didn't need to turn her turn signal on. You got to go listen to it. If you just go find Revisionist History, look through the episodes. It's probably season 2 or season 3, but he does a great job of unpacking the biases, the lack of de-escalation. Is that the right term? Just so many mistakes. Oh my goodness! And it ended with this lady taking her life.
Gladwell to me is one of America's best storytellers. He's the best. He's up there with Mark Twain and Ken Burns to me, and others. But those two often get lauded as great story. Ken Burns is an amazing storyteller. Mark Twain's an amazing storyteller. Malcolm Gladwell is up there in that category, and he gets often I think misunderstood as being like somewhat simplistic, because he takes these wide-ranging areas and makes it accessible. And he has said, I'm glossing over things. If you want to go deeper, certainly do, but he brings a lot of things to the forefront to give us our first access to things in a way that we can digest and understand, and then you go deeper if it's of interest to you. But I think that he gets thought of as not a very deep person because his podcasts are, for lack of a better, a little bit surfacey, but that's on purpose. And when I say they're surfacey, it doesn't mean they're not impactful and meaningful, but I think they're good entry points into deeper topics.
Yeah, him and his writing. I've read every one of his books, from David the Goliath, Tipping Point. I mean, maybe it's, in the first episode, episode 5 that we had, we talked about the difference between Dan Paff and Boo Schexnayder for me. And I said, Dan was he's just too smart for me. I'm a kid from Alabama. And I was like, Boo, for some reason, like he takes these high level concepts and he teaches, like I can understand them. Malcolm is that. I need him to be a little surfacey, talking about these deep subjects, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to learn. I'm sorry, man.
I can see that.
Well, thank you. I don't know. Was that I don't know. I don't feel like that was a compliment, Kebba, when you said.
No, I can see that. That's a good analogy. Boo was like Boo and Malcolm Gladwell, like birds of a feather.
Yeah. So, well, hey, Kebba, thank you so much for that conversation. Again, the influence you have, and as a father, for people that are connected with me through social media, if they were ever to do an audit of my social media, most of them are track coaches, because I first of all, that's who I know and that's who I love. But track coaches have mainly kind of 2 kinds of posts on social media. One is my kid did X, Y, and Z or something like that. My athlete broke a record. We're going to this track meet, etc. And those are great, right? I mean, that's our business. That's what we're in. That's what we do. And then the other, sometimes less common social media post will be my kid, or the anniversary with my wife, or a vacation, things like that, on the personal level. And I bet you I might be exaggerating a little bit, but I bet you I'm 10 to 1 that I will, and I purposely go to heart, that I love, not just the thumbs up. I go to the heart. That I love when I see, for you specifically, Kebba, pictures of you and Malcolm, pictures of you. The other day, the video, I don't know, was that wasn't Leia's first steps, was it?
No, they weren't very first, but they were like the next day.
Okay, yeah. I thought that, things like that, that's because I care so much about the person who became a track coach, not just the track coach. I just love that so much. And so when you do things of your heart, from when you share your kids, you share your fatherhood, you show your loves of your interest outside of track, you know, the Star Wars and things like that, which I love, of course. In that video on May 28th, you know, that to me that's the person. That is Kebba Tolbert, not Coach Tolbert. And to me, that is so much more impactful. You have a great positive impact on athletes, specifically 18 to 22-year-olds, but your impact as a person is much, much greater and wider. And much like I talked about earlier about how a Dan and a Boo looked at you and a Jimmy V when you were doing that mentorship, like proud, like, hey, these guys are spreading the word to even more people than we could. It's the same. You know, you are impacting 18 to 22-year-olds. They're going to be fathers and mothers one day. They're going to remember lessons that you, the person, taught them, and make this world better. We are moving forward. I think we're moving forward slowly. I wish we would just speed the F up sometimes to be to continue the changes that we need. But it's hopeful that when people like you and many others that we're not naming right here, but we're focused on you, continue to be the open-hearted big person that you are, and leading by example and by words, that is how we're going to continue to get better.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
This was better than I could have imagined. I just love your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Man. I love your story. I love your journey. I won't hold you to a part 3, 10 years down the road. Who knows what podcast and such look like, but I am super excited. You know, we're friends outside of business as well. Right. I'll always be rooting for you and watching you as you continue in your fatherhood, your husbandry, is that how you refer to it? And obviously as you're coaching, man, you're doing a great job. I love you to death, and I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you.
Kebba, that's Kebba Tolbert, everybody. Check him out on social media. You will not, you'll be better for it. Let me tell you, just go and check him out. Thank you, Kebba.
Cool.